Excuse me of saying this as a Conservative, Lord President. Two wrongs don't make a right, and we're looking at the behaviour of this government in this Parliament.
I'm just saying, as a trajectory of improvement, this is not a trajectory that's going backwards, this is now a trajectory that's going upwards. So we have made 192 oral statements to the House in 170 sitting days. That is more than one a day.
While listening to this speech, one thinks, we made 192 verbal statements, more than one per day. So what? They're trying to write heroic epics based on these numbers. How many times did they inflate the numbers and leave them empty? Let's continue with the clip, but if you agree with me, don't forget to leave a like on the video. Thank you.
We've also tabled over 800 written ministerial statements. In the last session, the government made 72 oral statements in a year, over 101 sitting days. So, you know, way less than one a day. So what I'm saying is it's a trajectory that's going upwards because it's something that we take incredibly seriously.
All new governments coming in, particularly when there's been a change of party, have more things to announce because it's a brand new legislative. So
we've also
I'm not entirely sure we need to compare apples and oranges.
Well, I think it's an important comparison. I mean, I think if you look back over that whole session, because actually also what's changed over time, I'm sure you'll agree with this, is actually the expectation about oral statements, the use of urgent questions, which even when I first was elected 12 years ago was very rare, and the use of urgent questions has now become more part of the norm. And there's a bigger question there about which the Modernisation Committee is actually looking at, which I chair, which is about the use of parliamentary time in the day and balancing all those pressures, because actually I speak to colleagues and they would they like to participate more actually in statements and urgent questions sometimes than in big debates on legislation. You know, are we always getting the balance? You know, are we always getting the balance of that right? Should statements come at a different point in the day and so on? Because there is much more demand on it, and the use of urgent questions has gone up.
Well,
but I've also made sure.
Well, President, sorry, I just want to.
Yeah. Just conclude my point.
And then Mr. Taylor, just on this point, and then I will come to John.
You know, and I do take the point about pastoral elements. I suppose it's useful for us in considering this to consider whether or not the general trajectory is such that the convention should be adjusted in the future based upon if every government's struggling with this. But we've heard the figure, you know, the ratio of announcements made to the House that's been put to us a number of times and to Parliament in explaining the government not making announcements to the House. The Ministerial Code doesn't specify a ratio that should be made to the House. It specifies that all major announcements should be made to the House. So the overall number of announcements made is not relevant.
It doesn't say all. It doesn't say all. It says the most important, which is obviously a decision that's made, a collective decision that's made every day and every week. In which case, the statistic
which would be relevant here would be the most important announcements. What proportion of those have been made to the House? But the point is the figure is not relevant here. The point is that there have been repeated breaches of announcements being made that are significant at times when it really should have gone to Parliament and Parliament was available for those announcements to be made.
Such as?
I think anyone would have felt the Strategic Events Review, particularly given the level of briefing and the fact that journalists appear to receive all the information in relation to it prior to Parliament. That is a fairly significant breach of parliamentary privilege.
Well, should we just go? Do you want to go through that, seeing as that accusation has been made?
We will come on to the SDR as a separate issue.
Well, just to be clear, the SDR was published to the House as published, as opposed to people being allowed to go into a reading room and so on earlier in the day to see embargoed copies of it. And we can come on to the specifics of journalists, but that was published to the House first. Right. And obviously you do want to have, this is another balance that you need to get, which is that we need to give members ample time to read a document before you actually then have the questioning in the oral statement, because I've had many criticisms of that not being the case, being the other way round. So, for example, with the announcement about the WASPI decision, responding to the Parliamentary Ombudsman report, which was made to the House first, actually the criticism was the other way, which was that members didn't feel they had enough time to consider that before then questioning the Secretary of State on that matter. So they are also trade-offs, and that's also in the guide to parliamentary work that is in the Ministerial Code. And can I just be really clear that obviously the Ministerial Code is a matter for the Prime Minister. It's the Prime Minister's Ministerial Code. But as I said at the outset, even if this wasn't in the Ministerial Code, this would, and it is in it's in expectations of the House and standing orders of the House. This would be an expectation of the House. I would still be in front of your committee being asked about whether we were living up to the expectations of the House in coming to the House with important policy announcements, so that members of the government would be adequately scrutinised. So I wouldn't want this committee to sort of get too bogged down in the Ministerial Code aspect of it. I know that's what the Speaker's asked you to look at. I strongly think, though, that the expectation of the House would be...
Mr Lamb.
Thank you. When saying the reasons why a statement might not be given because of Parliament not being in session, I think everyone would accept that during recess that makes a lot of sense, and over the weekends, if something is critical, that it would make sense for it not to go to Parliament. I was a little more concerned about the statement that apparently Monday mornings would be a reasonable grounds for someone not to make a statement to Parliament, because theoretically, the House does not sit until fairly late in the morning, if not the afternoon on most days, which would mean that for a minister who wished to avoid the scrutiny of the House and who wished to control the media narrative for the day, a morning briefing would be justified purely by the fact the House didn't happen to be sitting first thing in the mornings. Surely there's a more stringent requirement while Parliament is in session that ministers should be expected to come to the House, rather than just we don't happen at that particular minute of the day to be operating.
Sorry, I think maybe slight misunderstanding there, in the sense I wasn't saying that's a reason to not make a statement. It means it's not to make a statement first necessarily, but obviously would expect if a minister was making an announcement on a Monday morning, for example, that they would come to the House on the Monday afternoon at the first opportunity. And I think, look, we've got to, I think, as we've seen, and this is not to this government at all, this is development over 30 years or more. We obviously now operate in a very, it's not even just a 24/7 news environment. We operate in a minute-by-minute news environment with stories breaking on social media throughout the day, leaks, happening, things happening somewhere else over here, and all of that kind of thing. So we've got to try and manage making sure that the House is informed and those statements are made at the earliest opportunity where those things are evolving and they are moving very quickly, or announcements are being made. So that's always the balance. So sometimes important statements, budgets, for example, or I'm sure we'll come on to the Strategic Defence Review, those types of big statements, the reports should be laid to the House. I very strongly view those reports should be laid to the House first, those statements should be made to the House first. But obviously other announcements where they are being made to the media and so on, you just need to make sure that you're coming to the House at the earliest opportunity later in that day.
But the Ministerial Code says that the first instance should be to Parliament, not that they should that same day come to Parliament. The problem here, what I think the Speaker has written to this committee is there does seem to be a pattern here that it is possible to provide an excuse that Parliament doesn't have to be sitting at that minute, and therefore you can give a statement in whatever format you want, rather than waiting until the House is in session, which surely has always been the case, particularly back in the days when we're longer or later operating hours, that you would be waiting the whole way through the day in order to make that first statement, but they were following that principle at the time. On your point in terms of the changing media environment, I fully accept that. I mean, we've been asked to look into this, and actually one of the questions that I think needs to be added is, do we just feel that this convention is a convention whose time no longer operates? But so long as it is operating, surely there is an expectation that ministers will follow it, regardless of how inconvenient it might be for the media narrative.
Well, look, I mean, obviously there are lots of sort of subject. When Parliament is in session, the most important announcements of government policy should be made in the House, in the first instance to Parliament. And there are quite a few subjective words in that. That's just all I would just be clear. I think it's, you've got to also strike the balance between big reports.
First of all, it says first.
Yeah.
And when it says the House is in session, which is different from when the House is sitting. The session was, if you take the SDR, we were still in the parliamentary session.
We were actually in recess.
Well, no, because recess finished. We were coming back on
finished
Monday.
Finished at 3:30.
And the SDR was not time sensitive.
But we can come on to the SDR if you, I'm sure we will. So, I think, look, there's several things to unpack here. So let's just unpack a few of them. Can we do better? Yes, we can. Are we doing better than the previous government? Absolutely we are. And I think that's just really important to make this point here.
Now look, they say urgent questions have become normalised. They present this as something to be proud of. The increase in urgent questions is not a good thing, my friend. It shows that the government is not doing its job properly. It used to be rare because those in power worked seriously, so there was no need for questions. Now they are busy putting out fires every day. This also shows that the state is preoccupied with crisis management, not vision. Do you think this country should really live in a constant state of emergency? Should we wake up every day thinking, oh no, not again? Would this have happened under Thatcher? Number. She would have stated her decision clearly, straight from the horse's mouth. Today, media gossip trumps parliamentary authority. Do you think this is normal? Look, the funniest part is this. We make the most important announcements to Parliament. That's a lie. A blatant lie. Take the Strategic Defence and Security Review, for example. Journalists know everything. Parliament finds out later. Do you know what this is like? It's like a father announcing a decision at home not to his children, but at the local pub. Then he comes home and says, I was going to tell you anyway. Is this how a state is run? Starmer and his team are sidelining Parliament to appear strong in the eyes of the press. But the irony is this, if Parliament doesn't appear strong, neither does the press, because accountability is lost. Do you think journalists can control the government? Of course not. That's why the system is collapsing. They say, we made an announcement on Monday morning, but we'll come to Parliament in the afternoon. Come on, is this child's play? The future of the state is announced like a Monday morning meeting note, and in the afternoon they say, oh well, let's pop into Parliament. The logic behind this is, serve the media in the morning, set the agenda, pop into Parliament in the afternoon and close the book. So I ask, at what point do they care about Parliament? Not at all. That's where the hypocrisy lies. They say it themselves, but they don't realise it. Who do you think this tactic benefits? The public or securing their own seats? The answer is clear. The last part really made me laugh. We already live in a 24/7 media age. Information spreads in minutes. Yes, that's true. But is that an excuse? So trending on social media is more important than being accountable in Parliament. This mentality doesn't govern the country. It only governs the Twitter agenda. In other words, the fate of the country is at the mercy of retweet counts. Do you think this is democracy? No, it's just PR management. The tragicomic part is that no matter how many explanations they give, the public's trust is diminishing because it's not about numbers, it's about sincerity, and that's what's missing. So what do you think? Will the Parliament's authority return? Write your comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more such behind-the-scenes comments.